And now for Mrs. Miller in Art Box by Manic Mark. Mrs. Miller, delicious pot brownie. Mrs. Miller's, her first name was Elva. She made records, a greatest hit. She was the greatest vocalist ever. She made records on Capitol Records. She was a singer. She recorded Downtown. Nancy Sinatra's boots were made for walking. They were singles that charted 82 on Billboard. She sold 250,000 copies in the first 3 weeks. She studied voice. Mrs. Miller studied voice at Pomona College in 1965. She was on the Jimmy Durante Show. Inky Dinky Doo, said Jimmy Durante on his show. She met Lovey in an elevator from Gilligan's Island. Lovey said, "You may call me Natalie, Mrs. Miller." Mrs. Miller said, "You may call me Mrs. Miller," said Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller was on the Ed Sullivan Show. She was on the Ed Sullivan Show 2 times. Mrs. Miller was on the Ed Sullivan Show 2 times. Mrs. Miller was discovered by Gary Owens. He was the announcer on Laugh-In. If you buy this box, you get a CD of Mrs. Miller's greatest hits. I recorded it directly from a real vinyl record onto the CD. You get the CD with the Mrs. Miller Art Box. Thank you for watching my presentation.